Hello number ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and today we're talking about the Pope again. And you might be thinking to yourself, goodness gracious man, you are obsessed. And I would tell you, yes, you're correct, but that would also accurately describe 3/4 of my life. I just get obsessed with things, so here we are. Let me just start by saying Pope Leo XIV isn't my favorite Pope, neither is he my favorite Leo. More on that later. I may have made a few posts on X where I have expressed my disagreements with the Pope, and interestingly enough, some of them did go viral. All of them got misrepresented, of course, by my haters to tell me, hey, Metatron, the Pope calls for peace, and you have a problem with it? What, you don't like peace? Disgusting of you. Fantastic strawman, but no, of course, who... let me just say it once quickly. Yeah, it would be lovely to have peace everywhere in the world, okay? So... I have no problems with the Pope calling for peace. I'm 100% for peace. But when it comes to the topic of radical Islam, peace through force, not peace through surrender. That was not one of the items of disagreement. My problems with the Pope are, in general, his attitude towards immigration, his attitude towards Islam, his defense of Islam, his positions when it comes to Islamophobia, believe it or not, while never mentioning Christophobia, his involvement with politics, and I'm just going to leave it at that. But today I'm going to talk about something very specific, and it's his walls. I'm going to take you through a journey and discuss the history behind the walls that are currently surrounding the Vaticans, who built them, which pope, why they were built, and that's going to be very significant and extremely relevant to my critiques of the current pope. And then we'll compare some of the statements made by period popes and compare them to the sort of positions that the current pope has. If you like historical deep dives, don't forget to subscribe. The walls around the Vatican are part of a fortification structure that was built in the 9th century, the line running in a kind of enclosing arc from the river near Hadrian's mausoleum, which later becomes Castel Sant'Angelo, up around the Vatican Hill and back down again. So the fortified system tied the sacred precinct to one of Rome's most important strongpoints. All of this history will become relevant in a moment, but before we jump into deeper analysis of the fortification proper and the battlements, I would like to underline this. Some people are surprised, or at least they were on Twitter, with the fact that an Italian like me would have a problem with the Pope. How dare you criticize the Pope? What, an Italian criticizing the Pope? Are you out of your mind? Literally, look. I love it when people who have never set foot in Italy have opinions about both Italy and Italians. Brother, complaining about the Pope in Italy for Italians is a Tuesday. No, in fact, it's not. It's a Sunday. Lunch. No, I mean it. Go anywhere, any region in Italy. Enter the premises of whatever the heck family you want. As they are busy eating pasta, breaking the bread and drinking the wine, the TV will be on, the current Pope will be on screen, and between a bite of focaccia and a fork of pasta, the lovely Italian family is gonna go on a very... and I mean it, very heated debate on His Holiness. And the cardinals sometimes, depends. Maybe for dessert, we get to the cardinals. No, literally, I mean it. Half the family thinks the Pope is amazing, and the other half thinks he's the literal Antichrist. It's just a thing, okay? So the relationship between the papacy, the Holy See, and the Italian population has been a relationship of hatred and love for the last couple of thousand years. So there's that. Fundamentally, Pope Leo IV is based. Pope Leo IV was based. Not the 14th. The 14th, I can't stand him. I cannot stand the guy. Pope Leo IV, however, was based. You see, Pope Leo IV, the other Leo, is the one who built the walls around the Vatican. And he's based. So how about we compare the positions and ideas of Pope Leo IV and Pope Leo XIV? The older fortified zone within the walls of the Vatican are called the Leonine City. The reason being that the defensive circuit was built in the 9th century under Pope Leo IV. And to be precise, the fortifications were built roughly between 848 and 852, making this the first time the Vatican Hill area was fully enclosed by a major defensive structure. It's important to underline that the Leonine fortifications were a substantial military effort for the time. They were massive. So at this point, we beg the question, why did Pope Leo IV decide to build this enormous defensive system? It was the Muslims. I said it. It was the Muslims. It was the Muslims. I don't know what to tell you. It's history. It's history, guys. It's history. already, once the Basilica of St. Peter's became one of Western Christendom's most important pilgrimage sites, its vulnerability became obvious to the local authorities. And clearly, having a strong fortification could also help with other unrelated issues, such as possible threats arriving from the nobility and other domestic dangers we might explore later on this video. However, the turning point that made the Pope decide to take drastic measures in order to enhance the defensive capabilities of the Vatican was the raids by the Saracens, who sacked the Basilica in 846. And by the way, whenever you read that word in medieval manuscripts, it's talking about Muslims. That's what they mean by Saracens. It's Muslims, it's Islam, it's Islamist raiders. So, the current Leo tells us we need to be less fearful of Islam. The medieval Leo was so fed up with what the Muslims were doing at the time that he decided, fuck it, I'm not putting up with that shit anymore, and built a 3 kilometers long, 40 feet high wall with 44 defensive towers placed at intervals. And while period sources tell us more about the workforce that was employed from an architectural standpoint rather than the type of troops that were enlisted in order to guarantee the functionality of the defensive perimeter and to literally man the battlements, I can guarantee that they would have been professionals of the time. And of course, eventually in 1506, we have the founding of the Swiss Guard, specific political unit that is used as defensive element of the papacy, but that's for a different video. It's actually very interesting to look at the very early enclosure system, originally at least laid outside the ancient Aurelian walls of Rome, across the Tiber River from Rome's traditional urban core. And if you read medieval writers and modern reference works, you'll notice that they describe the enclosed area as covering both the Vatican City and Roman district of Borgo. As I mentioned on my somewhat controversial tweet on X, but that's just me, you know, I'm a grifter, there is this type of comparison we should consider. I ask, question, when were the Vatican walls built? Answer, in the Middle Ages, 9th century. Why were they built? To protect against raids from the Saracens. What religions were the Saracens? They were Muslim. You might think this is obvious, but it's not. It is not. I'll show you what I mean by that, because they're denying stuff, and that annoys me. Question, what was the name of the Pope who built the walls because he was not going to put up with invasions? Pope Leo IV. And then I add my commentary. Leo IV turned the Vatican into a stronghold, a fortress, as a response to foreign and domestic attacks. Pope Leo XIV, instead, is all about fighting that Islamophobia and calling out the bigots. What happened to the West? This ruffled some feathers. I double down on everything. No apology from me. 100%. Absolutely not. There are a lot of ways we can branch off and continue to elaborate on this discussion, but one thing I do want to mention are, of course, the slaughtering of Christians in Nigeria, but I do have a strong opposition against the Islamists, the violent. There is a lot of them. They are a reality. It is the most violent religion in the entire planet, whether you like it or not. That's a fact. It's statistic. It's mathematics. And the thing is that I expected more from the head of the Catholic Church, because a lot of these Christians that are dying and they're being martyred, they're looking up to him. So he should spend less time to tell us about Islamophobia and more time to tell us, leave the Christians alone. But then again, a man can dream still. I do, however, have even more of a problem with some of the cardinals and some of the statements that they have made, because it's gaslighting. Check this out. So this is an interview that happened in Castel Gandolfo residence on November 18th, where there is terrorist activity over economic questions. Economic questions? I'm sorry, but Islamists taking out and beheading Christians is not an economic question. Look at what Cardinal Pietro Parolin said. Secretary of State of the Vatican. He drew criticism last month after telling journalists that violence in Nigeria was, and I quote, not a religious conflict, but rather a social conflict, for example, between herders and farmers. Now, Cardinal Pietro Parolin is a liar. You're a liar. You're a disgrace. Were the Twin Towers destroyed not because of a religious conflict, but rather a social conflict? Why will they not say it? At this point, Leo IV all the time. Leo IV at this point, I'm sorry. Not sorry. At least Leo IV is like, what's the problem? We've got insane Islamist raiders. They're destroying stuff. Christians don't feel safe, Your Holiness. And the Pope is like, all right, build the walls. If they try that again, man the crossbows. And guess what? It worked. But what we get today is cardinals denying. They won't even say it, that the religion is obviously Islamic. They won't tell you, no, it's not. It's just conflicts between people, you know, economic and land. Right. For anyone who understands the history of the Vatican, the papacy, Catholicism, Christendom in the West, it is absolutely normal to expect the Pope and the cardinals to defend Christendom, to defend the Christians, to stand strong in defense of Europe against any threat, against any foreign invader. No, you need to defend your people, your women, your children, the weak. That's what a Christian man does. We fight evil and we defend the weak. If you were to ask any medieval Christian, laic or not, do you think that after preaching the gospel, the first duty of the church is to defend and protect Christendom? It would be an automatic, of course. Why do you think they justified the Crusades, particularly the one in 1099, as a way to protect Christian pilgrims that were going to the Holy Land? They founded Templar orders, knightly orders, to do that, because it was the most normal and expected thing from every Christian, everywhere in Europe, when it comes to the Holy See. They are defenders of the faith, they are defenders of us. Anyone messes with us, the church will protect. Where did that go? I think at the end of the day, we must not forget our history. This is why it's so important to keep a strong connection to our history. So to the people that tell me you should not disagree with the Pope, fine, I don't disagree with the Pope, the medieval one. I agree with Leo IV. I think it was based. I think he had the right, correct, defensive reaction to invasions. And since the history is important and they want you to forget it, I'm going to continue with my presentation. But before we do that, massive announcement. Check this out. You're going to love it. As many of you know, or at least I think you know, I've been writing a book, my new journey into becoming an author. I've mentioned this on a few videos and on X, but this book was indeed crowdfunded. Now, any person who has donated or will donate to the crowdfunding will receive a full audiobook, and this is crowdfunding exclusive. So, as a way to say thank you to the people that have donated and supported my dream of becoming an author, if you have a minimum of $5 donation, you will receive the entirety of the audio file of the book, recorded by me with my voice, no AI involved, as a crowdfunding exclusive reward. This applies retroactively, so for all 262 donors that I've had so far, you'll get this, and anyone who decides to donate $5 or more, thank you very much, never expected, always appreciated, then you will be guaranteed a audio file of the book by the end of the crowdfunding campaign. Important, once the crowdfunding campaign is over, this audiobook version will not be made for sale. So this is once again crowdfunding exclusive. It's a perk. If you're interested in the audiobook, click the link in the description, and thank you so much. An interesting aspect of the walls is that they were not static, meaning that in the 12th to the 14th century, the Vatican area expanded architecturally, and the Leonine defenses were restored and reinforced as the papacy's permanent presence in the area deepened. The papal palace complex grew, and so did the need to secure not just the basilica, but any administrative and residential center. But it wasn't just a matter of Pope Leo IV who was based, it was also later popes who transformed the walled precinct into something closer to a fortified courtly and administrative capital. And by the late Middle Ages and Renaissance, the Vatican was no longer merely a defensive shrine, it was becoming the main papal residence, especially after the papacy's return from Avignon and the increasing concentration of government, art, archives, and ceremonial life alike. A second major phase came with the early modern popes, especially the fortification works associated with Urban VIII in the 17th century. UNESCO even describes the historic area west of the Tiber, showing that the visible Vatican perimeter today is not only Leonine in origin, but also the product of later papal military architecture. How did we go from that, which is still symbolically represented by the medieval walls, which do work, by the way? If they close that gate, which is usually open, but if they close that gate, good luck getting in. Well, you can fly, I guess. They couldn't fly at the time. But if you're a migrant, an illegal, you want to get in, you're not getting in. It's just how it works. It's strict. And it should be strict, by the way, because I'd like to remind, hell has open borders. Heaven has strict immigration law. Of course, I'm not discounting the correct teaching that we should be kind to the foreigner. It's in the Bible. But which foreigner? The ones that come in peace, assimilate, respect, enter through the proper channels, that add value, honor to our community? Absolutely. Some refugee without completely collapsing the system that require help because they're running away from war? Absolutely. Without overpowering the system. But what about the ones that commit fraud? What about the ones that come here, actual criminals, attack our women, attack our children, hate us, sing to our death? Absolutely not. That's not the type of foreigner that is mentioned in the Bible, and all you need is a little bit of contextual reading. Not to mention the actual words in Hebrew. That's not the type of immigrant that the Bible is telling you to be nice towards. And this idea that now the current Pope is telling, oh, but it's just, we shouldn't be fearful of Islam. It's just the people that don't like foreigners and they... No. No. The people are fed up with the violence that is happening in Europe. The people want the truth. And it is the duty of the church to provide protection for the good people of our country. So what about today? Well, today when we look at the walls, these large stretches, they still define the edge of the Vatican territory and of course the Vatican Museum zone as well, especially along the long outer perimeter you see from surrounding Roman streets. Inside them lie the Apostolic Palace, the Vatican Museums, the Vatican Gardens, the administrative buildings, and the Great Basilica Complex. Official Vatican material notes that the gardens alone cover about 22 hectares, roughly half the territory of Vatican City, which helps explain why the enclosure feels more like the walls of a large compound rather than the border of a typical city center. Some people will agree with what I say, some people will disagree. Okay, that's wonderful, but let me tell you more about these Saracens that attacked and who were the reason why the walls were built in the first place. So as we were saying, generally speaking, the medieval Latin sources call Saracens those Muslim raiders from the central Mediterranean, and it's usually a label that is broad and somewhat imprecise. In early medieval Christian writing, Saracen often meant Muslims in general, especially Arabic-speaking or forces operating from North Africa, or occasionally Al-Andalus, depending on the period. So a Saracen is not a precise ethnic term, it's a cultural umbrella term in connection to the religion. So the religion part, out of question. These were Muslims. Now, when it comes to the early attack in Rome in 846, the historical answer is that these raiders were indeed Muslim seaborne forces operating out of the southern Italian and North African sphere, and that they were likely connected to the Aghlabid world. And for those who don't know, the Aghlabids were a Muslim dynasty ruling in modern-day Tunisia and eastern Algeria. The capital at the time was Kairouan. And the sources do tell us that this is not like a one-time event, but they were heavily involved when it comes to raiding, sacking, and pillaging of southern Italy. So what happened specifically in 846 is that a Muslim raiding force landed near Porto and Ostia and plundered the Great Basilica of Old St. Peter's and St. Paul outside the walls, which lay outside Rome's main ancient defenses. The city proper was not taken, of course, but the attack was serious enough that it directly led to the building of the Leonine walls around the Vatican district under Pope Leo IV. The tricky part is that sometimes medieval sources describe them as Saracens, other times other European annals call them Moors, but certainly there isn't a single medieval historian, whether they be pro-papacy or against it, that tried the kind of gaslighting that we have to endure instead and told us, no, this isn't a religion, no, it's a social aspect because these people don't... To wrap up my critique, the Pope did talk about it. To me, I was disappointed because I didn't think he talked about it enough. It was said on passing a few times while he's spending, in my opinion, a lot more time telling us to be nice to Muslims, which then again, if you're a Muslim and you have no problems with the West, you have your little family, as I said many times, you're assimilating, you're learning the language, you have no problems, you're not violent, I don't have a problem with you. I know some of you disagree with that statement, whatever, freedom, my friends, freedom. But I do have a strong opposition against the Islamists. I wish, at this point, Pope Leo XIV removed the X from his name and recognized that Christianity and Christians have priority when it comes to his defensive efforts over Islam and Muslims. Peace through force, not peace through surrender. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. Subscribe,